Today we are joined by Nandini Chopra. Nandini is a managing director at Alvarez and Marsal in the corporate finance practice in Mumbai. She has more than 24 years of experience in various advisory sectors, including financing and mergers and acquisitions. She brings a unique and diverse perspective to the A&M group with her background in investment banking. Nandini graduated with a bachelor degree in chemical engineering from Birla Institute of Technology and Science. She went on to get her MBA from the Xavier School of Management in India. Nandini, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Susanna. Likewise.
Tell us a little bit about your background and your career journey. How was the transition from growing in a small town in India and then migrating to Mumbai?
It's been a very interesting journey to say the least. I spent my first 15 years of my childhood in a small town called Allahabad in the northern state, one of the northern states of India. Of course, went to a convent, always in a convent educated background. However, in we were never very good with spoken English. We always used our native language to communicate, and that's how I grew up till I was in grade 10 till high school. While we studied in English, and that's largely in India, the medium of education is in English. We largely spoke in Hindi, which is the native language, and therefore I was never very confident of speaking in or communicating in English, and that was a very interesting journey. From there on, I moved to another city on the other side of India, which did not know Hindi. They had a different native language, and the only common language I had with them and my new classmates was English. So you kind of went off the deep end and had no option but to start speaking in English. So I think the biggest challenge from coming from a small town for a lot of us, even today, it's a very large country, and therefore, and as we at Alvarez and Marsal hire from diverse backgrounds, we find people from some of the smallest towns who've kind of had a very different journey. So from there on, fortunately, I think there was no discrimination in my household in terms of girls and boys, and my father was an engineer, and it was a no-brainer that I should be an engineer. And from then on, I love the manufacturing sector, though I didn't see myself working in an oil rig I was a chemical engineer, but I didn't see myself working, in a chemical factory. I found them rather, not very comfortable. So I chose to do an MBA. A lot of Indians tend to finish their engineering and, do their higher studies. So I specialized in finance and marketing. And from that point on, I chose a career in investment banking. And from there on, for the last 28 odd years that I've never stopped working. I've worked every single day, literally never taken a break, and learned the ropes in a very my early ropes in a very large organization called SBI Capital Markets, which is in India's largest bank and their investment banking unit. From there, I moved on to KPMG, where I spent 15 years doing mergers and acquisitions. So I did public capital market work for the first 5 years, M&A work for the next 15, and then I joined A&M to start the investment banking business in a fairly unique setup because Alvarez and Marsal wasn't big on investment banking or corporate M&A. So, but the platform has allowed us to, be entrepreneurial and set up a business here in India. And I think I've been here. It's more than 7 years, and I'm still around. The business is very well known, touch wood. And so that's the journey from a really small town to where we are today.
No, that's absolutely amazing and really inspirational. And I must say, I can a little bit relate to your story as well, because coming from smaller city in Czech Republic, exactly no background in English. So I also had to find my way and overcome difficulties. And I think that your story is definitely inspirational for very, high number of, I'm sure, females and even men that actually know they can break the ceiling, and if they work hard, learn the language, and make their career even in investment banking, right? So
That's right.
it's
Yeah.
really nice. It's absolutely nice and inspirational to hear your background and your journey. um, what makes your investment banking background different at A&M?
That's a great question, Susanna. I'm sure you're also familiar with the platform, but largely, I think A&M globally was built on a background of restructuring and distress, turnaround, and from then on, we moved on to from consulting. We added transaction advisory. So we've always done transaction advisory as well, but largely on diligence. And we have a small corporate finance team under George Varugis in New York. But beyond that, there are pockets of capabilities that I find even today. I'm very surprised to see there's great M&A capability within our restructuring teams across Europe, but we never really set out an investment banking business. And I understand from our
Mhm,
leaders that's largely because a lot of our business comes from investment banking community, and we didn't want to compete with them.
mhm,
In India, the journey was a little bit different. The India A&M journey started about 12 years ago with Lehman. 2008 is when we kind of set a flag down here because we were running the Lehman bankruptcy, and there was significant Asia assets, including Indian assets, to deal with. And that's how there was a very small team of less than 10 people who were leading the Lehman job under Shankar. And then in about that's 2008 for you. In 2013, I think A&M India kind of took a leap and hired a team of three people led by Vikram, who's our current CEO. And along with him, I was part of he was with KPMG, and I'd worked with him for the longest time. Vikram,
mhm,
another colleague called Manish, and I kind of came on board to add three new business lines for A&M India. So that was transaction advisory, that's TAG as we know it. There was CSG or corporate strategy, and there was corporate
mhm,
finance. So we kind of came as a package deal. I think Brian and Tony kind of went through all of us, and I must have been uh, a tag along. I'm being lighthearted about it, but I'm really grateful that they gave me that platform to start an M&A business. So we started small. Nobody knew Alvarez and Marcel back then.
mhm,
So it was
mhm,
largely on the back of very personal relationships that we brought from our prior organizations and our past and our networks. And from there on, we built mid-sized deal credentials, mostly in the growth sector. And then I think what was really transformative was the bankruptcy code that was notified in 2017. That kind of changed, it completely put us in front and center. It were in the driving seat. It was our core. We knew this. We were on top of this game. Pretty much in every other jurisdiction. We participated with the government to formulate their thoughts and paper and the code, and we played a very integral part of that exercise because we brought that knowledge from other jurisdictions of what happens in bankruptcy. So the code was notified, and interestingly, India put some of their largest NPAs into bankruptcies in the first year. So there was what we call the dirty dozen, and
mhm,
amongst the dirty dozen was a very large steel company called SR Steel, and we became the administrators or resolution professionals, as we call it in India. So that was the first. We literally went off the deep end with the largest bank exposure, credit lender exposure. We had to run a steel company. We had to run an insolvency process with lenders, and we had to run a sale. And so we had a three-way team led by Nikhil, Vivek, who was a steel man, and Dhruv, who's part of the forensic, who leads our forensic disputes and investigations. And I kind of led the M&A work stream. So that kind of catapulted us, Susanna, into the big league in terms of you had to run it like any other bulge bracket banker, and do a very large outreach to find buyers for this asset. It finally, after two and a half years, the price tag was nearly $6 billion,
Mm-hmm.
and we successfully closed that transaction. So I think that kind of put us right on the top of the map. We kind of ended up on top of the heap, at number two for merger market, number two for Bloomberg, and number three for merger
Mm-hmm.
market in 2019. We closed that
Mm-hmm.
deal. So it took a very interesting 2.5, lots of twists and turns. But SR Steel and the bankruptcy code kind of put us up there. We also ended up doing a lot of buy side advisory. Large corporates saw this as an opportunity, saw the
Mm-hmm.
bankruptcy code as an opportunity to find assets at better bargains, better prices. Otherwise, India has always been a very hotly priced, a very highly priced market for non-stressed assets. There is a lot of valuation premium that companies enjoy and also seek when they're out to sell, right? So it's an expensive market for buyers,
Mm-hmm.
and the insolvency code suddenly gave us deal supply of fairly good assets, but had kind of gone belly under because of the large debt that was not sustainable. So we also became house bankers to a number of large corporates who started to look at these, and we closed a number of transactions on the buy side. So that kind of really was the pivot for the A&M corporate finance for my business, really, to
Mm-hmm.
and get right on top in terms of, and created a brand for ourselves in distress assets, and we continue to kind of do that.
Mm-hmm. No, that's amazing, amazing overview. And as you mentioned, the success story of A&M in India, which is known for its distress and bankruptcy work, having opportunity to work on this major case, putting us up on the map there in India
Yeah.
and building the brand. I'm sure you guys did amazing job. Once we were discussing that even though the firm has 50-50 hiring ratio, you mentioned that the gender ratio are then skewed when you look at the manager level position. Why do you think you struggle to find women in our sector, and what probably we could do better?
Great question. We're trying to solve this conundrum for forever. As I
Yeah.
see it, we try and at A&M here, at least in India, we try and have hire from our MBA colleges, and
Mm-hmm.
largely that's where we recruit from. Um, in pretty much the same ratio as they're churning out their gender ratios. It's not like we're hiring more women than men, but if in a so it actually reflects pretty much the student population, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in India, it's very interesting. In a school, in high school, the numbers are just 50-50, very
Mm-hmm.
equal. Um, but by the time in engineering, that number kind of goes down to about 20%. Not a lot of women
Mm-hmm.
choose engineering.
Mm-hmm.
The MBAs in India, at least, are largely from engineering schools, and that's also been a very old tradition. And therefore, that funneling starts to happen at the talent at the college level, right? So, in my MBA school, we were just three ladies out of 60. uh, that's not a great example. There are better colleges with about a 15 to 20% gender ratio between females and males, and we hire accordingly, right? So when we go out to hire, it's not like we're we're very merit oriented. It's not like we're out to attract more female talent
Mm-hmm.
than male talent, but um, we kind we what we found is in our lower levels, it's a healthy about 30%, maybe better than the college output. We are and that's about a 30%. One in three women are one out of three of our associates and senior associates are women. But when it comes to managers and senior managers, we find that goes down to one fourth. So we've already
Mm-hmm.
lost one woman out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to directors, that 25% ratio has gone down to 5% or 6%. And that's worth thinking about. So, one is we haven't had enough time. We're a relatively young organization. Most of our
Mm-hmm.
hiring and the bulking up has happened only in the last 3 4 years. And I mean, we're hoping that in the next 3 or 4 years that all of these people that we've recruited will get to the director, senior director position. So
Mm-hmm.
there isn't
Mm-hmm.
enough time on our side to demonstrate that this won't get better. When we hired at our senior level, there have been more lateral hires at our senior level, as you can imagine, because again, not enough time for people to kind of grow all the way. When we hire at the senior level, we find that um, uh, you know, talent is not as diverse. So especially we recently, it's interesting, we recently went out to hire somebody senior in M&A, in corporate finance for my business, because we wanted to grow. And we had an executive search firm, and I have to say we probably saw over 100 CVs. There was not a single woman out there. So the supply kind of, especially perhaps in investment banking, kind of just goes away. And I'm not even talking about them not wanting to evaluate a platform like ours because it's not a very well known iBanking platform. It's just that the supply of CVs, the first cut, was just didn't have any ladies, not even
Mm-hmm.
one. So it was quite intriguing to find myself in that position. So when you obviously when you kind of ended up hiring somebody, there was a no-brainer. You were not going to see any women. So and in investment banking particularly, we find that the hours are very brutal, maybe similar to
Mm-hmm.
consulting, but the hours are
Mm-hmm.
brutal. The travel is quite brutal.
Mm-hmm.
The nature of the business is a contingent business, right? We only get paid, unlike consulting. You chase it down, you compete with your competitors. Once you win, the money is in the bag. You will execute and you will receive your fees, right? In M&A, it's not so. You first compete with your competitors to win a deal, to win a new engagement, and then you go around, for a good 6, 9, 12 months sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
looking for potential buyers. If you're on the buy side, hoping that you will be the winning bidder. So there is another probability of success, which makes the fee so much harder. So for
Mm-hmm.
every 4 engagements, 3 to 4 engagements that we run, we will close only one. So
Mm-hmm.
it can be quite challenging. You have to have a different kind of stomach, because you've got to run that much harder and more uphill to get the same revenues as your colleagues in fixed fee kind of jobs. So
Mm-hmm.
to that extent, my business is extremely different, and maybe that's one of the reasons why we don't see a lot of ladies kind of lasting. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and across all the firms that I've worked on, the initial numbers are great, but as it progresses, we found ladies. I'm not talking about people who choose to prioritize marriage or babies over
Mm-hmm.
work, but if they had to, I do see a lot of people opting for slightly easier jobs, either
Mm-hmm.
consulting, or I lost a very smart lady to the Dell Foundation. She just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
work for got really disappointed with how everybody was just chasing money and wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
some social impact work. So
Mm-hmm.
women can get, at some point in time, there could be inflection points where they're kind of disillusioned with what they're chasing with this. So we find that the numbers keep dwindling. And
Mm-hmm.
in fact, in A&M, amongst the 250 people, I have the worst ratio for women. I may be the only MD in a group of
Mm-hmm.
17 MDs today, but my team, in fact, actually has the worst I'm not proud of that, but I just don't find the talent. It's the supply, and for me, I have to look at everybody on merit. If the supply is in there, then where do you pick them up
Mm-hmm.
from? So that's the
And I
story,
think,
unfortunately.
mhm. And exactly, I think that what you just mentioned at the end, on the beginning and now at the end, is we need to have a supply. And I think one of the way to do that is actually present success stories like yourself, go out there, present the inspiration that it is possible and that women can actually do their career, if it's in consulting or if it's in any social impact work. But I
Yeah.
think it is important to show them, enable them, and if they want to reach the skies, they can actually do that.
Absolutely.
Um, I cannot, of course, not to ask about the COVID impact and the pandemic and the challenges it posed on our organization in India. What does new normal look like? And what are some learnings the firm will adopt from this?
I think it's a work in progress. Everybody is waiting to see what others are going to do. But largely, I think we're a little bit more privileged being in the services sector. We
Mhm,
have fairly seamlessly been able to conduct our business sitting out of our rooms, sitting out of our homes. And that privilege and luxury cannot be, afforded in a lot of other sectors like manufacturing or healthcare, or there are so many sectors where people have had to go back to work, right? So we are in a better place, and therefore we also now, because we figured out that this is a possible way to it has its advantages, it has its disadvantage, but because it is possible to render the services that we do fairly seamlessly, without significant loss in translation, if I can say, I think it merits consideration whether this is something we can imbibe in our lives, on a more permanent basis. And I think that's under evaluation. We're at A&M India. We're doing a lot of introspection discussions amongst all levels. I think we put a committee together representing, people from diverse backgrounds, analysts to managing directors, to be able to take into account feedback. Now, um, there are client pressures, and clients will probably want us to meet them, which is absolutely fine. But working from your desk at office versus working from your desk at home is probably going to be a hybrid model, I think.
mhm,
There are some people who are fortunate to have big homes and have the ability to have their own private space where they can conduct their office work, close the door. But there are also people who live in very small homes or very large, combined joint family units of,
mhm,
where there are
mhm.
multiple family members, and they're finding it very hard to
Sure.
make that, physical space available for themselves. So some of them are feeling that they need to get back to be able to, so that they're more efficient or productive. So it's going to be a mixed bag. We will be
Mhm,
looking at people's circumstances. The good thing I really think is the inflection point at which we tend to lose our women, and I'm sure we've
mhm,
all seen it. The inflection points are literally marriage, and maternity, right?
mhm.
And that's when the woman struggles between two very seemingly opposite, objectives of handling, being at home versus being at work. And this, I think, kind of is a great solution, because now we've all understood and practically experienced that it is possible to be sitting at home with your baby in another room or your child in another room and conduct work. So I think this will enable us to bring a lot of our women back, or keep our women, even though they're going through these, life stage transitions. I think that is a huge opportunity that we have as a firm to keep our to make sure that the pipeline doesn't leak,
Yeah.
and we can carry all our women, the 35% women, all the way to the top. And I think that's what we should endeavor to do. That's an
No,
opportunity that this COVID has presented to us.
definitely, definitely. It's a very, very nice insight, and I cannot agree more because at the end, of course, the beginning of the pandemic was difficult if I only focus on work aspect, adjusting to new norm. But I think it was proven during past months that it is possible, flexibility is there. And as you said, it just provides us at the end with a win-win situation in terms of keeping women in workplace.
Yeah.
So definitely, thank you for that. Before we close, what advice would you like to give to younger men and women who are starting their career?
Great question. I think I always tell the young people, I see a lot of people applying, from a whole bunch of other companies, including some really solid, platforms like I see CVs from Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. And like my first question is, why? You're in a great place. Why do you want to come to A&M? And consistently I get these responses from the young people that we are not client facing, you know, or it's very long hours, or these two things seems to be bothering our youngsters. And I
Mhm,
for me, my advice to them, I said, regardless, I'm very happy to kind of evaluate you, but hard work cannot be sacrificed. There is hard work everywhere, so don't be under the impression that it's less hard work elsewhere. There's hard work for anybody who's starting out their career, whether they're a medical intern, whether they're a legal intern, whether they're into coming into consulting or banking. It is going to be hard work. So don't I find that the youngsters come with a work-life balance mindset much more. Maybe I'm
mhm,
old school, but my word of advice to them is roll up your sleeves, learn, dig your heels in, invest, and soak it all up. Every little
mhm,
experience, just do it yourself. Don't expect. A lot of them get very restless, they want to move on. I find
mhm,
a lot of CVs where people have just spent a year at their jobs and they keep moving. I'm like, guys, you're just too restless. If you don't, it's not just about moving from one place to the other and looking for better money. It has to be, you have to stay in a place and learn the ropes. If you do not learn the tools of the trade, you're never going to be great at whatever you do. So I think my biggest
mhm,
word of it, and it's probably extremely old fashioned and archaic advice, but there is just no substitute for hard work. And of course, I think the second thing I always do is tell people that they need to remain networked, never lose touch with their
mhm,
school buddies, with their childhood neighborhood buddies, because never treat anybody badly, because you just don't know who's going to become your client one day. I've had so many situations where people who were much junior to me, let's say at KPMG, are now CFOs of a client.
mhm,
So
mhm,
what goes around comes around. So it is stay connected. And you guys, this generation has so much more tools to stay connected,
mhm.
unlike us, right? We kind of got
Yes,
reconnected with our
yes.
larger networks somewhere when Facebook and WhatsApp arrived. But the new generation is always going to stay connected, and I think that's a huge opportunity that they have. The third thing I tell them is, stress. Everybody's really hyped up about stress and deadlines. And I think my advice to my team is, you know try and deconstruct the real nature of your deadlines and look at the cause
Mhm,
for that stress. Can you kind of
mhm,
we are always multitasking, but we're
mhm,
also constantly online. We're kind of dividing up our attention, reading this forward and reading that newspaper and reading this mail and doing 10 other tasks. You should have the ability to step out of that, your own life role, and be a fly on the wall and just watch and prioritize what's important. So I think those are the two or three things that I would tell the younger people. Not be, to be patient, to dig your heels in, to work hard, stay networked, be good to people, and bide your time. Everybody will have their day. There's no rushing the race. There's no getting ahead,
mhm,
and
mhm.
it is a marathon.
Yeah, indeed. No, thank you very much, Nandini. Very, very wise words. And at the end, you own your career, you own your path. So you just basically need to live up to your
Yeah.
aspirations. Perfect. Thank you very much. It was last question for our talk. Thank you very much for joining us and supporting our reflection series. It was my
Thank you.
pleasure to discuss, and I'm looking forward to have you next time.
Thank you, Susanna. It was a real pleasure and it's a fantastic initiative. Thank you so much and all the best.
Thank you.